Hey, StFX. So we're just here for our interview series with the candidates for federal election here in Central Nova. And so today, I'm just going to be talking to Sean Fraser, the official candidate for the Liberal Party in Central Nova this time around. So we're basically just going to be going through a couple questions today, basically just a little overview of Sean's platform, a little bit about himself, what got him into politics, and then also some student-specific issues like we're talking affordability, some debt after you leave your degree, climate change, and social justice in our communities here. And then kind of finishing it off with just a message to students out there, and then also just Sean's go-to karaoke song. So yeah, we're just gonna get her going. And also I would just like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And so yeah, Sean, I'll just start it off. Would you mind telling us just like a little bit about yourself, like maybe some hometown, some hobbies, post-secondary type stuff? I'll let you get at it.
Sure thing. First of all, look, thanks very much everybody who's tuning into this. It's really great to have the opportunity to engage. It feels like a bit of a homecoming for me. You know, I was a Students Union president here at StFX back in 2005, 2006, and I've got a few gray hairs coming in since then now that I've been in this job for a while too. But our offices were literally right behind where I'm sitting now back then. So look a little bit about myself. My name's Sean Fraser. I'm from Antigonish, which is in Pictou County, sort of halfway between here and the town of New Glasgow. Grew up in a big family, got 5 sisters. All 5 of my sisters and both my parents actually are StFX grads as well. I'll proudly wear the X ring. You know, when I was making the decision to run for office, I'd been working a little bit at West, overseas, really trying to engage myself in my professional career at the time. But I had some real frustrations with the government that preceded us before 2015. The issues that I cared most about creating job opportunities for people from this part of the world, fighting climate change, pursuing social justice to make sure that the economy actually works for everybody and not just the wealthiest members of society. I found that these were just not priorities that were shared by the people who were in office before. I started chatting with a few of my buddies from work, and they said, well, we're tired of listening to you complain, so if you want to do something about it, why don't you run for office? It wasn't a week later that I saw the previous MP announce that he was retiring from politics. There was actually a Liberal candidate before me in the 2015 election who stepped down, and all of a sudden I showed up at an event, a buddy's wedding, and everybody at the wedding said, hey, if you were ever going to do it, now's the time. So I thought on it for a little while. Left my job, and a couple weeks later I was at home knocking doors in Central Nova here in Pictou County and Antigonish and the Eastern Shore, and I'm really glad I took the leap. We've been able to make a lot of progress on important projects here at home. We've been able to advance policies that are helping fight climate change. We've been able to put direct economic benefits for families from low and middle income backgrounds, and going back to my days as Student Union president, we'd had the opportunity to put some policies in place that make education more affordable as well and set people up for success in their career. So look, that's really how I got motivated from the beginning, but despite the fact that I've had some pretty cool professional opportunities, I try not to forget where I came from, whether it was my time on campus here or growing up in a big family in a small community, and I try to bring that perspective into Ottawa politics every day I go to work.
That's fantastic to hear, Sean. It's great to learn a little bit about you and also like what got you motivated in the first place. I think it's fantastic when just like an opportunity like that opens up and you really have the chance to step out, make those changes for yourself, and kind of just, yeah, like really just get out there and empower the voices. So just after that, I'll really just get into some of the more student-specific questions here. So our first one is just about like the affordability of education. So the affordability of education does continue like to be a barrier for many youth that are seeking out post-secondary education across Canada. And Nova Scotia actually has like the highest average tuition cost in the country, which continues to be a bit of a battle for a lot of our students here. So basically our question really is just, how would your party seek to address these barriers and ensure that students looking to access higher education have the ability to do so?
Look, thanks very much for the question. This is a really important one. Back when I was working on campus as a student advocate at the time, one of the things that really bothered me is when you met people who came from low-income families, disproportionately people who come from those communities, that hurts everybody. The world's next scientific developments and business solutions might be locked in the mind of somebody who can't afford to go to school. And when those solutions don't emerge purely because a person can't afford the cost of going to school, the entire world misses out on their contributions, not just that year when they're a student, but for over the course of their life and career. It's in Canada's self-interest as a country to actually increase accessibility of education for people who do come from different backgrounds that have historically been left out of educational opportunities. There's been a few things that we've done over the past few years that have made a meaningful difference to actually increase access to education, including the doubling of the Canada Student Grants Program, which actually in the most recent budget was extended for a couple more years, including making changes about the way that student loans can be repaid over a longer period of time, including a reduction of the rate of interest on student loans to zero during this pandemic, which we're making permanent, and including a number of other measures that are designed to encourage people from different backgrounds to actually pursue an education. But it's all well and good to talk about things. Important is that we haven't actually stopped adopting new policies, new ideas that are going to continue to make education more accessible. So if you actually dig in on the platform that's specific on student issues, this is something I'm actually very, very proud of. What we're doing is not just trying to tackle the cost of education on the front end, but making sure that you can justify the investment on the front end by making it easier to pay back the cost of an education. So for anybody who's got a student loan now or who might be paying back a student loan, there's a couple big changes that we've announced as part of our platform that I really hope we get the chance to implement. So we're saying we want you to be able to pursue a career after you finish your education, and we don't want you to be forced to take just whatever job happens to be available. One of the changes we're making is saying you're not going to have to repay your student loans until you start earning at least $50,000 a year when you can afford to do it. If you have a kid and you want to start a family, we want to make life a little bit more affordable, and we're going to say you don't have to pay back your student loans until your youngest child turns 5. We're permanently eliminating the interest on Canada student loans, which is going to save an average of about $3,000 for 1 million Canadians who tend to be younger Canadians. These are really big changes, but for people who want to stay and work in a community like ours, I told you creating jobs in the region I came from was a priority for me. So people don't feel pressure to disappear to a city. We're expanding the student loan forgiveness program, and we're increasing it, making it more generous. So it'll have up to $60,000 of your Canada student loan could be forgiven if you're in one of certain professions. This program used to have a threshold at $40,000 as a maximum, and it only applied to doctors and nurses. We're going to extend access to a whole bunch of other professionals who choose to work in small towns and rural communities, whether you're a doctor, a nurse, a pharmacist, a dentist, a psychologist, a mental health professional, a social worker, a teacher, an early childhood educator. For people who provide public services that are in demand, where we have a hard time holding on to them in small towns and rural communities, we want to say we want to forgive some of your student loan. If you put in a year here, we'll take a chunk off your loan. If you put in another year, we'll take another chunk off. In over 5 years, this program is going to tap out at $60,000 for certain professions that'll actually just be erased from your student loan. This is the kind of thing that's going to allow more people at the front end of their education to say, well, if I can wait until I have a good paying job before I have to start paying it back, if I choose a profession that's in demand in small towns and rural communities, some of that loan will be forgiven. This is going to change the equation for people who might be thinking right now, I might not be able to afford an education. And to see that this is baked into our platform, and look, don't just trust me for it, look it up, liberal.ca, it says our platform in big letters at the top. Check it out for yourself, think critically, and compare what the different parties have on offer. There's no question in my mind that this is precisely the kind of thing I used to advocate for when I was a student advocate. And now that I'm sitting on the other side of the table, I think it's really important that I continue to push the envelope internal to Ottawa politics to make sure that we can actually increase access to education for students who can't afford it.
That's fantastic, Sean. And seriously, I thank you a lot for that response. You really knocked out two birds with one stone there, honestly. Because yeah, the tuition on one side, obviously looking at that and wondering, how am I going to be able to take out a loan? How am I going to be able to pay for this in the first place? But then also, as you were saying, on the back end, when you're coming out of school and all of a sudden you've got this debt and you're impeded from buying a home or starting a family, getting a good job and just being able to get yourself rooted in life after leaving a degree, I believe that some of those ideas really could make a huge dent and a large impact for students, a positive impact.
Yeah, we hope so.
That's fantastic. So I'll keep going on my questions here. And this next one is really just about social and racial justice in our communities. So we know the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted some groups over others, and it's also further exacerbated certain inequalities that were already present in society. So our question really is just, what kind of policies, if any, will you and your party pursue to promote social and racial justice in our communities?
Yeah, look, thank you. What we've seen over the past year and a half, whether we're talking about the Indian residential schools and the recovery of the remains of now thousands of Indigenous children, we've seen south of the border with the murder of George Floyd by police officers in Minneapolis, the kind of discrimination that racial minorities live with every day. And let's not pretend, although I cited the George Floyd case, that this doesn't exist in Canada. I've spoken with people who are targeted by police officers. I've spoken to African Nova Scotian police officers who were targeted by local police officers. The racial injustice that we have come to accept as normal in our communities it's an embarrassment, if I can be blunt. When I saw the stories break about the Indian residential schools, and look, this is hard to even talk about. I went to school with the Pictou Landing First Nation community. We shared a school for the first number of years I was a student. And to think that a generation before, here in Nova Scotia and across Canada, people were being taken from their families to go to school, not knowing whether they'd see them again. There was no cemetery on the playground of my school. My teachers knew my name. They didn't have a number for me. And when I got on the bus in the morning, my parents knew damn well I was coming home that night. It's hard to think about becoming a teacher or a doctor or an engineer if your life experience is characterized with the experiences that Indigenous people lived with in Canada who were brought into the Indian residential school system. When we deal with the African Nova Scotian population, there's continuing impacts of decisions that were taken hundreds of years ago. And for what it's worth, for people who don't know the history of African Nova Scotians, they have been in our province for 400 years. We love to talk about our proud Celtic tradition. I've got a Scottish heritage myself. They were here for 150 years before my ancestors were. There was a time when the city of Halifax had 30% of their population was made up of African Nova Scotians. This is something that is a big part of our history, but not a proud part of our history. Due to decisions that were taken at the time that have been perpetuated until, well, continuing today, we have entire communities where African Nova Scotians are not able to take out a mortgage because of the way that the land titles have been decided to be administered. People can't prove that they've owned a home despite the fact that their family has been in it for generations. And this is continuing to have an impact on people's credit availability today. It's continuing to have an impact on their ability to buy a home, and to pursue a job, to pursue an education. These are really unfortunate consequences that are the result of decisions that have been taken over time. And you need to look no further than this pandemic to see how some of these consequences have played out. Disproportionately, the impacts of COVID-19 have been felt by racial minority communities and women and young people in particular as well, which was not your question. We can get into that if you wish. What we end up seeing, because of some of the decisions that have been taken over time, we have more multi-generational homes in racialized communities. We have smaller homes that tend to have more people living in them, which put those communities at a greater risk of contracting COVID-19, put them at a greater risk of having to self-isolate if someone else in the household was exposed to COVID-19, meaning they had to stay home from work. If you actually look at the take-home earnings of racial minorities in Canada and Indigenous peoples in Canada as a result of the impact of COVID-19, you will see very clearly that the data will demonstrate they've been hit harder than people who look like me. This isn't fair. There's a number of things that we plan to do in response. And look, I don't want to just spit platform commitments at you. You guys can look up the platform if you want. A lot of effort being put towards engaging racial minorities in economic opportunities, both for their community level and at the individual level. There's a lot of effort, if we want to talk about some of the progress that we have made and some that needs to continue, about making sure that Indigenous Canadians have access to respectable housing, have access to clean water in every community in Canada, which is well underway, and I'm actually really, really happy with some of the progress that's been achieved, but the job is not done. You look at the housing situation for African Nova Scotian communities right now, think about pursuing an education if they don't have a roof over their head. And right now, given what's transpired during the pandemic, we're seeing minorities squeezed out, and low-income people actually from all racial backgrounds squeezed out of the housing market, which prevents them from having a safe place to live. Look, this is a topic we could spend literally a week on, and we would never get through it all. There are specific commitments made in the platform that deal with anti-Black racism, that deal with reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, that are designed to support newcomers who arrive in Canada, that are designed to fight Islamophobia, not just on campus, but in our communities more broadly. And even if we want to cite a specific student example about the campus atmosphere, one of the commitments we're making is to help provinces hire 1,200 mental health professionals that have specific training in dealing with Black, Indigenous, and persons of color, and the impact that mental illness and mental wellness has on students that are in a campus environment that historically have not had access to the mental health supports that they need. There's a lot of attention that's been given to these plans, but I just want to reassure you that they are not developed by politicians like me sitting behind closed doors. They're developed in collaboration with communities who are telling us what their experiences have been and what their needs are and what the solutions are that are going to help them overcome the challenges that they're facing. So if I look back at the last year and a half and I see the plight that racial minorities have been facing, that women and young people have been facing, it's a choice if we don't remove the obstacles to success that are sitting in front of them. And I very much want to be a part of the decision-making team that's going to remove these obstacles so everyone has the opportunities that I've had growing up.
Thanks a ton for that response, Sean. That was really powerful. I think that if I'm just going to key out on two things there, one, I always find that I like seeing politicians being able to acknowledge the fact that these issues do exist and that a lot more work is needed is always, I believe, a first step. And secondly, what you were saying at the end, actually going and consulting with the communities that are being impacted the most and need the help so that direction can be set by the people who are being affected is always important. So I just want to say thank you for that response. Our last question really that is student specific and issue focused is about climate change. So another issue that's been at the forefront of conversation on campus and around the world throughout the last few years is climate change. So youth will be disproportionately impacted by the drastic changes in our environment, and this will increase exponentially as the years go on. We're just really wondering, what ideas would you and your party look to develop in order to confront our climate emergency kind of head on?
Thanks for this. There's hardly a more important issue in my mind. The climate crisis is a major part of the reason that I decided to run for office in the first place. You know, actually, if you'll indulge me for a moment, the first official role I've ever held in my life was Vice President of the Environment Club at Frank H. McDonald Elementary School when I was 7 years old. I've literally been an advocate to protect our environment and over time to fight climate change since I was a kid. I had the distinct privilege of serving as the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of the Environment when Catherine McKenna was in that role, and was sitting at the table when we were designing Canada's plan to fight climate change. This is an emergency, and we need to treat it like an emergency. The cost of tackling climate change might be expensive, but I can tell you it is a pittance compared to the cost of ignoring the need to take action. Before I get into the environmental prerogative, let's just look at the crass economics of this. If you talk to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, they'll tell you between 1984 and 2010, if I'm not mistaken, the average payout for insured losses from severe weather events was between $250 and $450 million. Actually, it was 1984 and 2000. Since 2010, that amount has increased to nearly $2 billion a year. Within a few years, they expect that it's going to be approaching an average of about $5 billion a year. Insured losses typically represent about 1/3 of the actual cost. We pay for this. We pay for it in municipal taxes. We pay for it in federal taxes, provincial taxes. We pay for it because our homes become damaged, because a severe weather event knocks over a crane in the city of Halifax that destroys a building. We pay for it when I lived in Calgary during the floods in 2013 with the property damage that took place there. This is impacting every corner of our country. We have storm surges on the East Coast, floods in the West. We've got forest fires that are ravaging British Columbia, heat waves that are killing people in Ontario and British Columbia, and we have melting glaciers that are forever changing the cultural impact of Canadians who live in the North, particularly Inuit who call that part of the country home. We need to be doing everything we can to reduce our emissions as quickly as possible within Canada. And we also need to be helping inspire the world to take greater action. Some of the kinds of things that we're working on include achieving net zero emissions by 2050, include having an emissions-free grid within the next 10 to 15 years. We have a plan to make sure that every car sold in Canada after 2035 will be non-emitting. We have plans to make the largest investment to protect more of our natural environment in Canada's history. We actually set that record in 2018, and we're now by exceeding it by an additional $500 million with the most recent investment in the federal budget. There are literally dozens upon dozens upon dozens of measures that are designed to reduce our emissions. And please don't just take my word for it. I want you to think critically. I want you to ask yourself what the experts are saying who are looking at what the different parties have on offer, because there's no question in my mind that we do have the best plan. And it's not just the right thing to do to protect our environment, it's the smart thing to do. When you invest in home energy retrofits, you actually put people to work in your community, you reduce your emissions, and you save people with low incomes money on their power bills. There's a company in New Glasgow, my hometown now, Trinity Energy Group of companies that do this sort of work. And it started out with two guys who were good contractors that knew how to fix up homes. They started tapping into government benefits that actually helped homeowners make their residences more energy efficient. Last time I checked, they had 76 employees. Their business is doing amazing. People from all over Canada want them to open franchises elsewhere because it is reducing our emissions and it's saving people money on their power bills and it's creating jobs. This is just one example. We get a company in Dartmouth called Carbon Cure that's actually found a way to sequester carbon from the atmosphere and inject it into concrete, which is tremendous for the construction industry because they have a stronger product, their buildings last longer, and it's literally pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. These are the kinds of things that we need to take action on now, not just because it's important for the environment, but there is a wave coming in climate investment right across the world. And we have to decide if we're going to be on the front end of that wave and take advantage of the economic opportunity with climate change, or are we going to let it pass us by? Canada might only be a small part of the world's total emissions, but we have the ability to punch above our weight and provide solutions for the entire world, and it's in our self-interest to actually pursue those opportunities. So whether it's from a social point of view, whether it's from an environmental point of view, whether it's from an economic point of view, it makes great sense to take action. One of the things that I will say, and I apologize for going on so long, this is a passion of mine, I don't think people appreciate the crisis that our wildlife is facing as well. Our natural environment often plays second fiddle to the need to tackle climate change by reducing our emissions. And they work hand in hand with one another because nature-based solutions can help reduce the impact of the consequences of climate change. But when it comes to protecting our wildlife, check out some of the reports from the World Wildlife Fund. They'll show you that about 2/3 or potentially more, depending on how you calculate it, of the world's wildlife species have lost about 50% of their populations in the past 50 years. They're at threat of extinction, and this is true in Canada as well. When I worked on the environment portfolio, I was responsible for caribou conservation in Canada. When I met with some of the chiefs of the West Moberly and Saulteaux First Nation in British Columbia, they walked me through the historical impact of the different caribou herds on their communities. They used to rely on them for food, for cultural and ceremonial purposes. At the time, the Lower Selkirk herd had 3 animals left. There were thousands before. The 3 were all female. That herd will be extirpated. There are some efforts to crossbreed that herd with other neighboring herds that are of the same species in an effort to preserve it for future generations. But the reality is, if we don't take action and say there might be an economic cost to some of our actions, what we're going to do is forever have local population units disappear from the face of the earth. When they're gone, they don't come back. The climate emergency is playing itself out in our own communities, and I would urge you to listen to what the experts are saying. Pardon me for being a little bit partisan here, which I try hard not to do. The Conservative Party of Canada's commitment right now is to literally do less to fight climate change. They want to reduce our emissions reduction target back to where it was when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister. We can't let that happen. I personally have answered questions about putting a price on pollution in the House of Commons as much or more than any other politician in Canada, because it was the right thing to do and it was my job to defend that policy. It was politically controversial at the time, and now everybody seems to accept it's a necessary part of climate action. I actually have a lot of respect for my NDP and Green Party counterparts when it comes to their desire to pursue climate action. I do think they fall short on the execution. I know there's been some experts writing recently about the fact that though they share our ambition, the plan isn't there to actually back up and achieve the outcomes that they want to see and that I also want to see. So do your research in this election. There is hardly a more important question. I think the best thing you can do in the next 2 weeks, if you care about fighting climate change, is to vote for the Liberal Party of Canada in this election because it is an emergency. We have a well thought out plan, and I'd encourage you to read it for yourself, check out the platform, and listen to what the experts are saying. I don't believe there is serious contest. I think you need to look at it for yourself because there is not a more important issue, not just for future generations, but immediately. But you're absolutely right, it will be future generations that pay the biggest cost if we don't take action today.
Sean, I can literally just hear your passion coming through on that question. Like, really enjoyed that, and thank you. I love your vision as well. I really can see Canada as a pioneer in tackling climate change and being a trailblazer, being a leader at the front of the pack, saying this is how we can take this head on. Because you are correct in saying that, yeah, like this is an emergency, and it's something that students are very conscious of, and it will continue being a big issue for students and youth for years to come, and as it should be for everyone, I believe. So just got a couple last little questions, pretty short. The first of which is really just what your message would be to students that are showing up to the polls this summer, or this fall, and really if it's somebody's first time, even if they're thinking about maybe not voting, don't really know what to do, what would your message be to those students?
Elections are won by people who show up. Vote. It is so important that you vote. And look, I hope I can convince you on the basis of the ideas that I put forward and that our party puts forward that you'll support us. But I want you to make that determination for yourself. There's a lot of people in Canada who have opinions about issues that I disagree with vehemently. They have opinions about vaccines. We have them trying to literally shut down drugstores that administer vaccinations in my hometown. There's people who do not believe climate change is real. I have gotten into a debate in the House of Commons with a Conservative member of Parliament who argued that the rising temperatures on our planet are the result of people's body heat. It's ridiculous. I have worked with people who are good people that simply believe that our economy should extend benefits to some of the biggest companies in Canada and some of the wealthiest members of society, in a belief that someday, somehow, the tax cuts that have been historically provided to millionaires will trickle down to the rest of us. I don't believe that's true. But it's not so much up to me to just argue with these people and to debate my own point of view. It's up to Canadians to decide which plan that they want to have in place. The decision that Canadians make in this election is going to set the course for which plan gets implemented on the back end of the COVID-19 pandemic. If you want to support a plan that's going to pursue social and economic justice, that's going to fight climate change with every policy that we have on the table, and that's going to ensure we continue to extend benefits to low and middle income families across Canada, then I think you'll find a home with us and with me as a local candidate. But my message to you more than anything is take a look at yourself as to what ideas are on the table and vote for the party and the candidate that you think is going to do the best job. I do think there's a lot at stake in this election, and if young people vote, I know that we're going to be on a track that is sustainable and will build an economy that's more resilient, not just for the wealthiest people in our community, but for everyone.
That's fantastic. I'm sure everyone, all of our students at StFX are going to appreciate that message. Really is important. Use your voice, get out there. It's really up to us to make sure that we are voting, making sure that we are seen as a voting bloc and a part of society that does care, and we want to get out there and use our voices, make sure that we're being heard, and make sure that our points are on the paper. So yeah, last question for you, Sean. Real, just fun one, honestly. What is your go-to karaoke song?
You know, we had quite a bit of a attention on our riding the last federal election because the Conservatives ran a well-known country singer in the election, George Canyon, who's a good person. By the way, I got to know him a bit during it. But look, he wasn't the only person who likes to sing country in the contest. My go-to karaoke song is Friends in Low Places. It's a Garth Brooks classic. Most recently performed it a couple of weeks ago at the Stellarton Legion. So if you host a karaoke night and you invite me, I'll come and show up, and I'll put on a show for everybody.
I will hold you to that.
Yeah, right on.
Awesome.
Right on.
Okay, well, I'll take that back for a sec, and that's really all we've got for today in terms of questions, Sean. Just want to say thanks again for coming in, talking to the students. I think this is going to go to great lengths in just making sure that students here are informed, able to empower themselves to make a great choice, and I can't wait to see it up there.
Awesome. Let me conclude with
Yes.
feel free. Look, I just feel obliged when I get an opportunity to share the best pieces of career advice that I received when I was a student here on campus. I'll pass it on for your benefit. It came from a guy named John Stewart, who was a former parliamentarian, both an MP and later a senator. There was two things he told me when we worked together on the Board of Governors at the university while I was a student representative. One of the things that he told me was to go get the broadest base of experience and figure out what you enjoy spending your time on. He said, you can't mess it up before you're 30 years old, so go and figure out what you actually want to spend your time doing every day, because what you spend your time doing every day is what you spend your life doing over the course of many years. But the other piece of advice that I'll leave with you, a lot of people who are going through university are trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. Don't think about what job title you want to hold. Don't think you want to be a member of parliament or the president of a company. Think about what problems you want to work on. That's the kind of thing that's going to keep you motivated to get out of bed every day to go to work. If you care about fighting climate change, then look for opportunities to do that in your work. If you care about social justice, look for opportunities to solve those problems in your work. If you're focused on the difference you want to make and the problems you want to solve, rather than the title that's going to be on your business card, you are going to have a much happier life experience at the end of your career. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to connect. I really enjoy being on campus here. It feels like a homecoming, as I mentioned during my intro. It's a pleasure to join you today, and hope to be back on campus again soon.